Fellow councillors, staff, residents viewing via live streaming, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners, past, present and emerging. Please welcome Pastor Joshua Symes from the Baptist Church, who will deliver the opening prayer.
Father God, we give you thanks that you are a loving, merciful God, that through your Son Jesus you provide us grace and mercy. Father, today as we gather, I pray for our council and our mayor as they discuss their agenda, Lord. Father, I pray that you'll give them wisdom and understanding on how to address these issues in a fair and caring way. And we pray, Lord, that you give them wisdom in dealing with their finances and how to spend them in the town. As a town, as we move forward through the coronavirus, Lord, we ask that you'll give us again wisdom and knowledge in how to care for our community in the best way. Continuing with the medical issues, but as a council, working through the economic decisions and trying to get the town moving economically so people can be prosperous and live comfortable lives. Father, also as we care for one another, may we as a town just make sure that everyone's cared for, no one's lonely or feeling isolated and are well, Lord. Father, we pray, Lord, that as a community that we will be caring for one another. So Father, we give thanks for you. We acknowledge that we are under authority, your authority, and the authority is above us. So we just ask your provision in these things. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Do we have any apologies? That's a no. I'll now read the declaration in relation to material personal interests and conflicts of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any material personal interests and/or conflicts of interest, real or perceived, in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and/or comment on other councillors and/or staff interests in accordance with the Act and regulations. Councillors, are anybody in a position where they need to declare a conflict?
Through the chair, I just want to ask the other councillors, I may have a perceived interest in the area of the catering that we're going to discuss today, as I live next to this person for 23 years. I don't think I've got a conflict, but maybe you do.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Millwood. That is recorded. We now move on to the first agenda item in community and customer service, and I'll call in Catherine Brennan to present the item reopening of libraries and customer services facility.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, councillors.
Morning.
The first item of the agenda involves the reopening after COVID-19. So at the time of report, there were no active COVID-19 cases in our region, and using the state government roadmap for the reopening of public spaces, we reopened our Tully and Cardwell and Innisfail libraries and customer service areas on Monday the 18th, so last week. It went really well. The COVID-19 safe measures are in place. The checklist is in the attachments there, the measures that we followed. The libraries are offering partial services, only the collection and return of books. The numbers may be lower than normal. They've picked up, but lower than normal. But the community seems to be overwhelmingly supportive of reopening. Comments overheard by myself revolved around somebody that was walking past to make a complaint about Rankin Street parking, and actually at the end of that said, but really glad that you guys are open. So it's been very well received. The second item is the revitalisation of Wandeling Mission Beach Library. That's progressing well. The second lot of windows were included a fire exit door and a staff entry. That's been removed. It looks a lot better if you've gone past there. Again, there's photos in the attachments. For stage 1 to be complete, we need a hand railing and some more gyprock. We're still waiting on the hand railing, but we've got a barrier in place at the moment as a temporary measure. It's closed until further notice. We do receive daily updates. At the time of report, we were still waiting on an update. I can now update that we are going to reopen on Monday. There are still going to be, the new door will still be commissioned. We may open with the old door, and the builder's fencing will be removed around the property. But like I said, the glass and doors, windows, and that exit sign still may be there. The customer requests are a fantastic way to gauge the community's engagement. I just wanted to bring that up, that we have received many customer requests on that issue, and they've all been satisfactorily dealt with, as in, yep, absolutely, thank you very much. We hear you'd like your library reopened, and we can update you as such. That's the end of report.
Thank you, Ms Brennan. Councillors, any questions for the officer?
You're very welcome.
Any further comments from the floor? If not, somebody prepared to move the officer's recommendation that the report be received and noted. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Brennan. We now move on to the second agenda item, which is Governance, Environment and Finance. Item 2.1, Budget Savings Catering. And I believe we hand over to Mr Singh. Before we commence, given that Councillor Millwood has highlighted a perceived conflict, is somebody prepared to move that she be allowed to stay in the room to participate in the debate? Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? That's unanimous. You can stay in the room, Councillor Millwood. You've declared a perceived conflict, but you've been given the green light by fellow councillors to participate. Okay, over to Mr Singh.
Good morning all. Since COVID-19, obviously, it has impacted various functions and within councils, and one of the activities that we have identified that has been affected has been catering. Due to the risk associated with catering, the pandemic committee obviously discussed the opportunities available with council going forward. And one of the things that council has agreed to is actually to do self-cater going forward in the interim until the COVID restrictions are completely over. And also what we have reverted to is just simple basic catering for all our council meetings and also councillor information sessions. And as a result, we are likely to anticipate some savings, and the anticipated figure for next financial year, if this arrangement continues, is anticipated to be roughly around $10,000. So councillors, the recommendation this morning is just that councillors receive and note this report.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillors, any questions for the officer in relation to this recommendation? I'd just like to compliment the staff in seeking more savings. I'd also like to compliment my fellow councillors who have indicated in previous discussions about the issue of catering, that they're supportive of officers trying to find any savings that are on the table. And we'll see how the vote goes today, but I remain confident that we'll support our staff in this saving. I note that in the previous year, $16,014 was expended on catering. Not a big item in the context of the budget, but I think it shows leadership from the group of 7. And again, I just want to thank the staff for identifying this saving. Are there any questions for Mr Singh? Is somebody prepared to move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Unanimous. Now,
thank you all.
Councillor Millwood vote on that or not? Is that okay? Yeah, that was a unanimous vote. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Singh. The next agenda item is 2.2, the monthly council reporting package, and hands over to Mrs
Bradley.
Bradley.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Ms Bradley.
Morning, Leah.
So the first report we have for you today is our monthly council reporting package for the month of April. So this particular report has taken into consideration the second quarter budget review, which was adopted by council on the 13th of February, and this is what's reflected in this report. The detailed analysis of council's year-to-date revenue and expenditure across all departments is included in this report, as well as some statistical information. So the highlights from the report are the end-of-month cash balance is currently sitting at 46.22 million as at the 30th of April. Operational revenue is at 86.4 million, which is 1.1 million over budget year-to-date, in comparison to the year-to-date budget of 85.3 million. So this represents 93% of our budget being received. Operational expenditure is sitting at 78.6 million, which is 1.47 million over budget year-to-date, in comparison to the year-to-date budget of 77.2, and this represents 85% of our budget being spent. Capital expenditure for the month was 2.32 million, and the year-to-date capital expenditure, including commitments, totalled 57.3 million. So this was 61% of the capital budget, excluding commitments, or 84% including commitments. So it's important to note that there have been some impacts in relation to COVID-19, which have been included in the forecasted figures within this report. So these can change based on the number of cases within the region and any stimulus packages released from the federal or state governments. So in the report itself, page 2 is our summary of financial results. So we've got a cash operating result at the end of the month at 30.28 million, which is 150,000 ahead of budget, with a forecasted cash operational result of 25.85 million. Net result before capital, currently sitting at 7.8 million, with a year-to-date budget of 8.14, so it's behind budget by 341,000. And the financial year forecast is sitting at a negative 392,000. The total net result for council at the end of the month was 17.6 million, with a year-to-date budget of 17.76 million, so 167,000 behind budget, with a financial full-year forecast of 18.85 million. The page 3 is our balance sheet as at the 30th of April. So total assets at that point in time totalled 1.24 billion. Total liabilities were sitting at 27.59 million, with total community equity at 1.2 billion. Page 4 is our monthly cash flows. So at the month of April, we had a net cash decrease of 6.126 million, leaving us with the closing cash balance of the 46.2 million mentioned earlier. Page 5 has information on the net rates and utilities received year to date. So council's currently sitting at 65.98 million, with a year-to-date budget of 95.96 million, so satisfactory results in that area. The two graphs underneath that are represented at the end of March, which we went through in the last meeting, so they're quarterly ones, which will be updated in the next quarter. Page 6 is our fees and charges. Year to date, currently sitting at 2.23 million received, with a budget of 2.2 million year to date, so we're 13,000 ahead of budget with a satisfactory result. Grants and contributions year to date, we're sitting at 17.3 million, with a year to date budget of 13.9 million, so we are 3.4 million ahead of budget in this space. This is mainly to do with our operational grants, with additional grant funding received for DRFA Cat D, which has been incorporated in the budget review we will go through next, as well as capital grants being 2.3 million over budget due to DRFA grant funding. Once again, those will be amended in the budget review. Other revenue sources, currently sitting at 13.6 million year to date with a budget of 12.8. So we are 778,000 ahead of budget. So gain on asset disposals, 339,000 over budget. So this is the sale of fleet items offset by a loss on disposal. Interest, as you can see, we're also behind budget by $164,000 at this year-to-date point in time due to reduced interest rates being able to be received. Other revenue, currently sitting $443,000 ahead of budget, to do with legal case insurance recovery, with the budget to be rephased in the budget review with the timing of the payments received. Other insurance claim recovery is over budget, as well as increased housing occupancy. Contract and recoverable works is currently sitting at $237,000 ahead of budget, and this is due to the timing of RMPC works undertaken. Page 7 gives you information on employee expenses, currently sitting at $22.2 million, with a year-to-date budget of $22.5 million, so we're $262,000 under budget there. Materials and services, year-to-date sitting at $24.9 million, with a year-to-date budget of $23.6 million. We are $1.3 million ahead of budget, mainly to do with accelerated roads programs and the grant funding which will be incorporated in the budget review. Other expense sources, currently sitting at $34.3 million, with a year-to-date budget of $31.4 million, so with $3.3 million ahead of budget, partially to do with depreciation over budget due to indexation and capitalisations that have occurred throughout the year, as well as the loss on disposal of $2.8 million, offset by the gain on disposal. Page 8 is our property searches. So for the month of April, applications received were totalling 68. So this is a 44% decrease on last month, but a 54% increase still on last year, April. Aged debtors for the month of April, we had 767,000 sitting in 0 to 30 days, 10,000 sitting in 31 to 60, and 145 sitting in 90 plus days. Page 9 is details of our incoming phone calls, which is quite interesting for the month of April. So totalling 2,119 phone calls for the month of April across customer service, rates and after hours. It's a 4% decrease on last month, but a 47% decrease on last year. So I did go back another financial year just to see what the anomaly was, whether it was 18 or 19 financial year, and it's actually this financial year. So 2018, we're sitting at about 3,000 phone calls for the month of April. In 2019, we're sitting at 4,000, and 2020 down to 2,000. So that's obviously an impact of COVID-19, less people phoning. Measures of financial sustainability at the bottom of the page. So our operating surplus ratio is currently sitting at 25%. Our asset sustainability ratio sitting at 124%, which is within our target range. And the net financial liabilities ratio sitting at minus 31%, which is also within our target range. Page 10 is information on requisitions raised and the timing of the invoice. So you will see an upward trend over the last 3 months, which isn't what we would like to see. Further training will be had and discussions with staff as well to try to reduce that number. Payments processed, so the graph underneath that, we've got total invoices processed in the month of April was 1,758, and 87% of those were paid within terms. Page 11 is our capital works in progress. For the month of April, our WIP was sitting at $42.5 million, with majority sitting under infrastructure and under the water department. With those balances, we had 33% sitting in the construction phase and 49% sitting in physically complete, which represents about $14 million sitting in construction and about $21 million sitting in physically complete. So the number of projects in each of our stages, we had 149 projects sitting in pre-construction, 84 projects sitting in construction, 68 sitting in physically complete, and 67 sitting in capitalisation ready. So the last page I'd like to go through with you is page 12, and this is Council's capital budget year to date. So our actuals are sitting at $41.38 million, with year-to-date commitments sitting at $15.9 million, giving us a year-to-date total of $57.3 million. So our year-to-date budget's sitting at $56.25 million, so we are $1.05 million ahead of budget year-to-date, with a full-year budget of $68.2 million. which represents 84% of our capital budget expended, including commitments. Were there any questions?
Councillors, any questions for the officer? No questions. Would somebody move that the recommendation be approved, that the report be received and noted? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 2.3, third quarter budget review. Ms Bradley.
Thank you. So a budget review is being carried out for the 10-month period ending the 30th of April. So the purpose of the review is to promote sound financial management and accountability by having each director and managers review in detail the components of their budgets within their areas of responsibility. So the proposed amendments to the budget incorporate some new operational and capital revenue that's been offset by associated expenditure, as well as monthly phasing adjustments. Detailed reviewers confirm that some minor adjustments of revenue and expenditure items are required between sub-programs that have a nil effect on the net operational result. So the finance team have undertaken a high-level review to ascertain the impacts of COVID-19 on Council's financials. However, no changes are proposed at this stage to Council's long-term financial plan as part of this budget review. The long-term financial plan will be updated as part of the 2021 budget process. So the changes proposed in this budget review reflect new capital and operational revenue and expenditure received over the last quarter. So these changes have a nil overall impact on the operating profit. However, the net result has increased from 20.3 million to 22.3 million due to asset disposal and write-offs during the year, and due to capitalisations offset by additional external grant funding received as a result of the DRFA submissions relating to the 2019 monsoon event. So in this report, we've broken it down to the capital and operational portion. So the capital budget, so the review looks at the budget as a whole and how Council's progressing in relation to its original budget. So as at the 30th of April, 61% of Council's capital budget had been expended, excluding commitments, with details provided in Appendix A and B to this report. So the review includes the following movements, which was the approved DRFA submissions relating to the 2019 monsoon event at 3.9 million, a new path at South Mission Beach, 50% funded with the state government for 200,000, as well as the Bagu entrance statement project at 33,000. The operational budget review, so there is a table in this report that reports the year-to-date actuals, the current budget and the proposed revised budget. So the main variances in this space is in relation to year-to-date interest on investments are under budget as mentioned due to reduction in interest rates. Our year-to-date other income is under budget by 97,000 and it includes the payroll tax, over budget by 97,000, includes the payroll tax relief as a result of COVID-19, family daycare business continuity payment, which replaces the childcare subsidy during the COVID-19 response period, and insurance claims that have been received. Under grants and subsidies, so grants of 20,000 has been reallocated from community assistance grants to specifically support community groups affected by COVID-19. The full year budget movement has increased by 543,000 due to additional grant funding obtained for the Monsoon Trough 2019 Cat D, as well as Works for Queensland grant funding. Employee expenses are currently under budget due to vacant positions, offset by increased expenditure in contract labour. The full year budget has been reduced by 204,000 due to vacant positions to offset increased lifeguard expenditure in materials and services. Materials and services is currently over budget due to increased chemicals used in sewage reticulation, legal expenses from ongoing legal cases, as well as fleet maintenance costs. The full year budget has increased by 937,000 due to additional grant funding mentioned in point 3 and an increase in external works under RMPC. Depreciation is also over budget due to indexation and capitalised assets after the budget process was completed. At this stage, there's no overall increase or decrease in the overall operational budget position, so these changes are reflected in Appendix C and D to this report. As mentioned, no changes are proposed to the revenue policy or the revenue statement as adopted by Council on the 27th of June. However, the introduction of the COVID-19 rates hardship policy could have an impact on the revenue generated on interest charges of around $65,000. The impact of this policy are unknown at this stage, and it's unsure of what sort of volume of eligible applicants will be received. The other thing to note is a financial and resource implication. So COVID-19 is anticipated to have a significant impact of up to $402,000 on Council's budget for 2019-2020. Variances are being monitored closely to minimise the impact on Council's bottom line. The financial impacts of the pandemic are still evolving, as you're all aware, and there still remains a lot of unknown factors that could influence the results for 2019-2020. Due to these unknown factors, no impacts have been included in this particular budget review. Did anyone have any questions?
Councillors, any questions for Ms Bradley? I do have one question. It's in relation to employee expenses. Don't know whether the CEO will answer this one or Ms Bradley, but where are we at with the latest certified agreement and back pay? Has that all now been expended and out of the way?
Yes, Mr Chairman, it's all been affected.
Okay, that's great. Any questions for Ms Bradley? If not, would somebody move that the budget review for the 10 months to the 30th of April 2020 be received and noted? Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. We now move on to item 3, asset sustainability, 3.1, contract for the Baldwin Reservoir, and I believe we hand over to Mr Goodman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, apologies, but right from the start, I need to point out an error. That's actually in the title of this report. It is the April report, not the February 2020. Apologies for that. We are in this is the process that we go through. We copy previous reports and make amendments, and we've missed that one. So apologies for that. I am pleased to say that this project continues to progress well. I was on site yesterday, and we expect to see the first of the walls of the reservoir erected today, and then so that's an important milestone for the project, and really important, particularly noting the boiled water event that the community has dealt with within the last week. The project continues to progress on budget and largely to time, with some delays, some minor delays, mostly associated with weather impact. The other, I guess, important milestone that has been delivered to date is the pouring of the slab for the reservoir. There's some photos attached to the report. So I don't have too much more to say, except that the project is progressing well and on budget.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Any questions, councillors, for the officer? No questions? Would somebody move the recommendation that report be received and noted? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. We move on to item 3.2, Infrastructure Services Capital Report. Mr Goodman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, as I alluded to a fortnight ago, there's a series of catch-up reports for our capital delivery. This report is for April, so it is a little behind in time in coming to you. Councillors, there is not a lot of significant achievements in terms of our capital works delivery within the April timeframe, it was largely can be attributed to focusing on our core business functions at a time when the risk of COVID-19 was much more than it is today. We have since recognised that within our a risk framework for COVID-19, and there are all projects that were put on hold. Some of them were mothballed for a small period of time. They're back in full construction. So you will not see a significant changes from the previous month's report, but all projects listed are there for you, and if you have any questions on any individual projects, happy to have a go at answering them.
Thanks, Mr Goodman. Councillors, any questions from the floor for the officer? I have one, Mr Goodman, page 69. The turning lane for the RV access into Hadrill Park. Can you give us a bit of an update on the scope of works and whose budget requirement is that to cover that? Is it Main Roads or is it going to be Council?
Mr Mayor, the scope of works is covered by a council allocation of funds. It's a fairly minor project, but it has, of course, being on Bruce Highway, Main Roads managed corridor. Those works have had to have gone through an approval process with Main Roads. We have that approval, it's in place, and we'll be working with delivery services to fit those works in and deliver that so that access is functional before the Hadrill Park becomes operational.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Councillors, any further questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move that the recommendation be approved, please? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Goodman. Councillors, we're now on to general business. Do any councillors have any general business items? Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Through the Chair, while we've got the Director of Infrastructure Services, Dave Goodman. Dave, could you please give us an update on the Port Hinchinbrook dredging project, as we're getting a lot of mixed messages, and it's when we got this 1.5 million from the federal government, I thought it was going to come as a cheque, but it's now a process that we have to apply for it, and I know you've been busy doing it. Could you just bring us all up to speed, please?
Yep. Mr Deputy Mayor, through the Chair, the Council is required to complete a request for information to allow the Department of Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development to undertake a value with relevant money assessment to provide the Minister with advice. And to do that, we need to include advice on economic and community benefits and how these are measured, business case or a feasibility study, the number of full-time equivalent positions created for employment in construction, and if there are any there on a permanent basis. We need to provide independent cost estimates or tendered prices, advice on the who is the long-term asset owner, the procurement process and budget. To date, with the aim of delivering on those requirements, Council has undertaken negotiations with the liquidator at Port Hinchinbrook or Hinchinbrook Harbour. We've undertaken some significant survey work there so that we can understand the full extent of the required works. We have now a draft report identifying the economic benefits, and we have been, we've almost completed the contractual documentation that we will look to put out sometime in the very near future. that documentation will take the form of, in the first case, an expression of interest. The current program is for that to go out next month in June, with that closing in August. That will allow us then to provide that, as we work through that expression of interest process, we anticipate we'll be able to provide all the information required of the department that will allow us to make application for that $1.5 million. We would anticipate that we would get that back to the federal government in September, October of this year, and then that will allow us to then undertake and negotiate a funding agreement with the federal government. We'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Could I just ask about your availability next Friday? 7 councillors are going to start doing inspections of budget deliberation projects, and clearly with the federal government, the dredging issue. We'd like to go on site next Friday. Could you make yourself available to talk us through the dredging issue and give us a bit of a feel for what is ahead of us, as well as the sewage treatment plant?
I feel pretty confident, Mr. Mayor, that I can make time on my calendar with that request, yeah. Okay, well, we'll let you know when we're going to be there, but we might make our first port of call Port Injunbrook, if that's okay with your itinerary. No, sure. Thank you for that. Any further questions for Mr. Goodman? No, all right. Further general business, Councillor Chewy.
Yes, through the Chair. Mr. Goodman, just regarding Mission Beach Aquatic Centre, just the applications for tender, could you just give some advice to everybody when they might be going out for the management of the facility, please?
There are 1 or 2 very small hurdles for us to get over, but it is our intent that those tenders go out this week.
Thank you. Also, through you, thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I address matters related to the operation of the Mission Beach Aquatic Centre? On Tuesday, May 19th, I invited representatives from various user groups, including health professionals, to enter a discussion about the opening hours of the MBAC. I have emailed those minutes to my fellow councillors, the Mayor, the CEO and Mr. Goodman. It became very apparent from this discussion that the centre is more than just a facility used by residents of Mission Beach. It is used by residents of all divisions of Cassowary Coast. People travel from Tully, Cardwell and Silkwood to use the pool. People with physical health issues, stroke patients, people with Parkinson's, Huntington's and people with other physical disabilities all use and need this facility as part of their daily or weekly therapy. The closure of the pool is causing anxiety as some people have no other workable options to exercise. The Eddy Bay Surf Lifesaving Club were travelling twice weekly to use it for their training while the Innisfail pool is closed. It's also used as a venue for triathlon training. The MBAC is a regional asset, one that can benefit the entire Cassowary coast. If we continue to think of it as a white elephant, we will continue to treat it as a white elephant. I therefore move that the CEO be instructed to have a report prepared, exploring the implications of various models for the operation of the Mission Beach Aquatic Centre, including, but not limited to, times and duration of opening to the public and the operation and the various components of the facility.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Baines. Any other councillors like to make comment on that motion? If not, I'll put it to a vote. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. So, Mr. CEO, it's noted that you'll prepare a report for councillors' consideration going forward. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Any further general business? Councillor Baines.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, while we've got Adam Sadler in the room. Adam, I know you've been doing a good job grading the roads, especially with the cane season ready to commence, and unfortunately we just had 15 inches of rain, which caused us havoc being councillors. The phone never stopped, and a lot of the roads which you have just touched turned to greasy messes. And I'd just like to comment you on the work that you've got your staff working overtime, and you've got trucks and graders running around. I'd like to just congratulate you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. That's been noted. You got further comment to make? Yep.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. One more thing. 2 more things, actually. for the last 10 years, I've watched school bus stops, and the council has done a great job, especially way back since Cyclone Larry's when we started to build these bus stops on country roads. And the negativity I've seen, the council do a great job. They put the concrete pad down, they put the bus stop on. 4 years later, those kids have finished school and moved on. Then that bus stop never gets used again. A mile down the road, we've got kids standing in the rain in the wettest district in Australia, getting on buses. Now, I've been talking to Engineer Tom and Engineer Justin, and I'd like to just let fellow councillors and the staff know that I've started talks with them to try and invent a bus stop that we can shift with the high-abs on the trucks that are legal, and we can shift them from house to house as changing wants. And I think it's a great idea. We've now got pads that we've unbolted the bus stops off and shifted them, and we've got pads with 4 bolts sticking up that may never be used. They're just a pain to mow around, and they're dangerous with passing traffic. So that's just to just let you know where the 2 young engineers and I are on that. And also another thing, Mr. CEO, I know that you've been, over the last couple of months, over the last couple of weeks, we've been trying to cut the budget. I'd like to now just look outside the square. We've got infrastructure assets, or we've got assets more so than infrastructure. We've got assets in our shire, mainly house blocks owned by council in Innisfail, Tully and many other regions, some of them with sewerage and water. Some of them have been there for up to 15 years that I'm aware of. And I know that you are doing up a report to bring to council to see if we can encourage younger families, and even if the council's got to help these younger families purchase these blocks, I think for our youth, and also it's costing us money mowing these blocks. If we could get rates out of them and give a bit of a leg up for young families. Thank you.
Over to you, Mr. CEO.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you, Mr. Chairman. The disposal of land is regulated under the Local Government Act, and the staff have been working towards putting a recommendation to council to proceed towards disposal of those what we might otherwise consider to be stranded assets. I expect that we'll be doing that within the next shortly, yeah, as soon as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Farinelli.
I just have a question, Mr. Mayor, if I can direct it through you to Councillor Barnes. I just want to get this right. So you've asked the staff to come up with some plans to create a movable bus stop, is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you like the idea?
Oh, I think the idea is great. I just don't know whether that crosses over into instructing. Does that cross over into operational, or is that something we should have discussed as a council, as a direction that we're wanting to take as a strategic direction? I just want to make sure I just don't know whether that's crossing over into instructing staff to do something. Is that operational or is that strategic? I'm not sure. I'm just seeking guidance from the CEO, if that's okay.
No, Mr. Councillor Farinelli, I haven't instructed anybody. All I did was been a plan of mine for a while, and I just told them what my thoughts were, and nothing will be done or anything along those lines until it's been brought back to council. I just thought it was very polite of myself to try and involve you, something for safety for our children, and so we're not putting slabs of cement down and having too much assets and infrastructure to look after as a council, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes, and thank you for your query, Councillor Farinelli, but we'll let the CEO answer this one because he knows all about strategic and operational.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't have any information which would provide that there's been any instruction given to staff. Rather, there's been a request for information which we'll duly provide. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any further comments in relation to general business? Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, just one that maybe Councillor Millwood may be aware of something. she brought up the fact that one of the caterers that we use lives in a street. Well, one of them live in my street too. So should I have used that, or just because they live in the street means nothing? Or is it important that I should have brought that up? I thought it was irrelevant, but while the meeting's still live, should I have brought that up?
I wouldn't have thought, Councillor Barnes, that merely living in the same street as someone would provide, under normal circumstances, for a conflict of interest. And clearly, the way that the council has dealt with Councillor Millwood's question would give some support to the view of the council in that regard. But it's kind of you to mention it.
You mind if I ask the fellow councillors their thoughts on it? Because I'll need their support if it goes outside this room, that's all.
Councillor Barnes has raised a perceived conflict. How do you feel about it? Should he declare it now or not? Because a caterer happens to live in his street.
Can I just speak to that, Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Farrelly.
Councillor Millwood did ask me prior to the meeting whether this was a concern. I basically said to her I didn't see it was a concern, but it was within her, if she felt that she needed to ask the question of her fellow councillors, that's all she was doing. And I commend her for asking the question, because there are quite a lot of grey areas, I think, under new legislation, and I think it's commendable for councillors to just ask that question and give their fellow councillors an opportunity to decide whether they see that being an issue or not.
Thanks, Councillor Farinelli. Councillors, do we resolve that Councillor Barnes does not have a conflict based on a caterer living in his street, and we take no further action? He has recorded it. It'll be picked up by the Minutes Secretary if there's a challenge later down your path. But your fellow councillors are saying, no, Councillor Barnes, you've got no issue here. So we'll move on. Next general business item, Councillor Millwood.
I just wanted to make acknowledgement that it is actually Reconciliation Week this week before we end the meeting, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
And that is acknowledged, so that will be recorded in the minutes. Reconciliation Week actually kicked off yesterday, and our staff have been active in that field. We have a RAP committee at council level, and we're very supportive of traditional owners and South Sea Islander culture, and more importantly, employment opportunities. We have a wonderful contingent of TOs working for council, and we're an equal opportunity employer, and so we're in partnership in terms of what we want to do with Reconciliation Week and the recognition of their culture and their wonderful history. Thank you, Councillor Milford, for raising that matter. Any further general business items?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Goodman, could you give us a rundown on the public amenities that were closed due to COVID-19 and when they may be up and operational again, public toilets, things like that?
Through the chair, if I can address them in a more general sense rather than try and address each individual public toilet. All public toilets that are associated with parks, public infrastructure, those sorts of things are now open. The only ones that remain closed are associated with sporting venues, which remain either underutilised or not open yet. There are a couple that remain closed in our cemeteries where there are still reductions in public restrictions in the number of people that can attend attend a funeral, I guess is the easy way to explain that. There are still public toilets open at our cemeteries, but not all of them. I think without going through the full detail of, and to be honest, I could not rattle off the 20 or so public toilets that are closed at the moment. That's the rationale now, and in any of those toilets that are closed, which are associated with sporting areas or sporting groups. As when we ever get any contact with a group that is back and is operating again, we open those toilets up.
Thank you, Mr Goodman, and thank you for the question, Councillor Pervin. Any further general business items? Councillor Baines, you've been very, very patient.
I have been very patient, Mr Mayor, and I do thank all the councillors for allowing me to speak today. Mr Mayor, it's come to my attention that one of our local residents, Mr Barry John Lansdowne, he's a retired member of the Special Air Service Regiment, and he's just been recognised and received a group bravery citation for works that he did with the West Australian Tactical Response Team in apprehending a violent offender at Fitzroy Crossing in Western Australia back in 19 June 1987. I know Mr Lansdowne quite well, as my father was also in the regiment, and we had a discussion the other day, and I believe it may be appropriate for us to acknowledge the receipt of this bravery award from one of our local residents. So, Mr Mayor, I would put it to the councillors that we could possibly minute this and include it in the minutes, and if the council agreed and the Mayor conceded, that we possibly send a letter of congratulations to Mr Lansdowne on the great works. There's 7 people have been included in this recognition. It was a full tactical response team that attended, but one of them is a local resident in the Cassowary Coast. So.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillors, we resolve that letter be written by myself in recognising Barry Lansdowne. I might add, Barry's a former councillor with the old Cardwell Council, and he was that highly regarded by local government at the time that when prospective candidates went to workshops thinking about nominating, Barry was the speaker who delivered on the experience he had as a councillor. So he was chosen by local government at the time to be a role model for future candidates in local government elections. So, yeah, take those comments on board about local resident Barry Lansdowne, and it's been resolved by your fellow councillors. The letter will be written. Thanks, Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you, councillors.
Look, I have one item. It's a hot topic in the community, the receivership issue with Mayfair. We all understand at the moment it's not impacting on Dunk Island or Mission Beach assets, but I've asked the CEO to deliver a brief today. It looks like he just delegated it to our governance officer. Thank you for that. To bring us up to speed, because we're all getting questions about it. The media are very hungry for a story, and unfortunately we're restricted in what we can say, so it's best to go to the people with the training and the skill, and we'll hand over to our governance officer to address it. Thank you. Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors. With respect to the relationship that we have with Mayfair, it's essentially that one of their the entities, one of the subsidiaries, have the lease that is over Dunk Island Spit. So I suppose in terms of the impact, whatever business activities occur with Mayfair, I understand in terms of the entities that we interact with, they're not the actual entities that are the subject of a receivership. And it's not for council to speak to whatever the business affairs are. I understand that the CEO, Mr Duplock, has already issued a press release on behalf of Mayfair, and I'm happy for that information to sit where it is. But insofar as council's concerned, there is no impact on us at this point in time. My understanding is that in terms of their obligations under the lease and other contractual arrangements they have within the region, and not necessarily to do with the council itself, they are on track.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Any questions for the officer in relation to Dunk Island, Mayfair, in particularly the Spit? Councillor Chewy.
Yes, I've just had questions from constituents regarding, and I have spoken to Mr Sadler, but I'd just like to make it public that there is no camping on Dunk Island at the moment because of COVID, but Mayfair are in control of the campground and the Spit. Is that correct?
They're one and the same. They're one and the same. So the campground sits within the Spit lease area, and my understanding is because of the construction that's being undertaken at the moment, I'd say largely not just because of COVID, but until even if the restrictions were lifted, until such time as it's safe to be out there and when the construction has ceased, then there may not be amenities available anyway until that time.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the officer about Mayfair, Dunk Island, Mission Beach? On a lighter note, people were saying that activities not occurring. Well, I can guarantee you they've got their priorities right. They're working on the bar. The slab was apparently poured this week, so it's very important for our community.
Hear, hear, Mr Chair.
Councillors, is there any further general business? If not, I'll declare the meeting closed at 10:55. 9:55. Well done, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chair.